Senator, I want to tell you my first thought at this moment. As a 3-year-old, my greatest hope was to escape a high chair. Rather awkwardly, I find myself in one again.
And I'm the guy who had to step on stage when you just said, and who is going to save the country? So,
well, it's got to start somewhere with someone, so you're signing up. You know State Senator Greg Dolezal represents Forsyth County, or do you say Forsyth? Forsyth, that's right. I knew it as soon as I said it, it didn't sound right. Elected in 2018. Senator, how in the world did you get into this?
I kind of backdoored my way into it because there was a road that I drove on every day that I wanted to get widened. And I started a website called fixforsythtraffic.com. Stood in the median of the traffic and handed out push cards and became a problem for my board of commissioners. And so when you become a problem for politicians, they pull you in. So they pulled me in and put me on the planning commission, but I remained a problem and decided one day to run for office.
Okay, I have to tell you, in the material given to me, I was told that you were the founder of Fix Forsyth Traffic.
Indeed, the great organization that has swept America.
Well, no. I really admire that, and I lived in Atlanta long enough to know that's an existential threat. I do want to ask the obvious
From
question.
Ontological to existential, can you
there
clarify for us the difference between ontological
Well, let's just put it this way. I experienced that threat. I just want to ask you, if the organization was entitled Fix Forsyth Traffic, did you?
It was my first broken promise as a politician.
Okay. Very good. But it's still a jump from a citizen initiative to running for public office. How did that happen?
Yeah, I really felt like, and still do, I shouldn't even say feel like, I thought and still do think that there is a need for different types of voices in the conservative movement, younger voices in the conservative movement, and people that approach things from a different perspective than what I saw some politicians doing at the time. And my opinion is that probably the greatest gift that Donald Trump has given to the Republican Party is that he has blown up the country club class of the party. And I'm coming in the wake of that. Yeah. And so recognizing, frankly, that we are not just here to kind of manage the existence of, in my case, the state of Georgia, but that we need to get upstream of what the left is doing and unwind the ways that they have reached their tentacles into culture and politics.
Amen to that. So how do you define yourself politically? What adjectives do you use? How do you say this is who Senator Dolezal is?
I think adjectives are probably best left for other people. What I would hope that the left would say of me is that I'm effective but respectful, that I'm the one who, when I stand up to ask a question, they say, oh no, what's coming next? And that they think twice about asking a question of me because they expect me to give them an answer that they may not expect. I'll give you an example. So we have the Women's Sports Billing Committee today. And what happens is these activist groups feed questions via text to my colleagues. And so one of the questions that came from my colleagues was, well, in the past, it's cost states billions of dollars when the NCAA is pulled out from their state. And aren't you afraid that we will lose billions of dollars? And I'm like, what a softball question. I said, ma'am, I am not willing to sacrifice women's safety and fairness on the altar of the American dollar. And so I want to be a person who is answering questions or saying things in such a way that reflects our movement with respect, but that also pushes back firmly against the narrative that they have.
Well, amen to that. And I certainly want to get to that legislative initiative in just a moment. But what about the adjective conservative?
I would think that that's far too moderate for where I actually stand politically. So
I set you up for that, yes. Let me put it this way. What are you trying to conserve?
I'm trying to preserve a republic that I believe is the greatest experiment of self-governance on the face of planet Earth. You know, you mentioned Francis Schaeffer and the fact that you knew him. I think that's amazing. I did an internship in college.
Let me just say, I knew him. He did not know me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think about How Then Shall We Live, which is a book that I read when I was about 20 years old. And so we have to answer the question, once we're redeemed, now what? Right? So why doesn't God just rapture us to heaven the second that we enter into salvation? Well, we are here to preserve something. And you mentioned dominion. And this idea of dominion theology is something I was introduced to about that same range, because obviously it's something that Schaeffer thought very deeply about. And so bringing God's kingdom to earth in a way politically in a post-Christian secularized culture is a very difficult challenge. And so I think that for us to think about the role of politics in an era where secular humanism is exploding, and the idea of moral relativism is very, very common, the idea of absolute truth is now the outlier opinion, requires a different approach to this job that we do.
So play that out a little bit. What is different then about the approach?
I think that the approach, the strategic approach to the bills that we drop, for one, and I can give you an example. So we had our local school accreditation was done. I live in the wealthiest county in the state of Georgia. We have the highest test scores in the state. The accrediting agencies come into our school and say, everything's fantastic, but you'll be well served if you implemented a DEI program. So they hold the hammer of accreditation over your head, because if you lose accreditation, property values go down, you lose the Hope Scholarship. Very bad things happen if you don't listen to the accrediting agencies. So my father-in-law is a school bus driver in my district, and not long after the implementation of this DEI program, he received an email telling him that he was no longer allowed to refer to the boys and girls on his bus as boys and girls, and that he should use more inclusive language. So I can make the phone call to the Board of Ed, which I did, as did a number of other parents, and get that pulled back. But my job, in my view, as a state legislator, is to figure out, how did this happen? And this happened because these accrediting agencies have far too much power. So we wrote a bill that said accrediting agencies who previously considered 29 metrics in the accreditation process can now consider 2: scholastic achievement and fiscal solvency of the system, and that's it. So we have to get upstream of the way that the left, frankly, has outthought us, in the way that, because this for them is religion, and Megan referenced this in a roundabout way. So we are attacking a methodology and a framework and a worldview that is approaching politics as a religion. For us, it's just part of what we do.
The accreditation issue, you're kind of hitting close to the marrow of the bone for me. I've struggled with this issue, fought this issue for decades. And pushback comes with a real effect. The educational elites, so committed to identity politics and so committed to the constructs of progressivist ideologies, they're not used to being pressed back upon. And yet we do have a vote. We do have an opportunity. We do have a stewardship to exercise here. I appreciate that. In the world of theological education, by the way, one of the problems with all of this is that you have a lot of schools, and most of them are very liberal. And they have the same vote as conservatives. But the conservatives have all the students. You know, there are lesbians learning knitting in most progressive divinity schools. There are, if you're training pastors, you're going to be in a pretty conservative school. Men as pastors, let's be clear. And so I will tell you that it gives me great hope that a legislature and the legislature at large, a state government, is pressing back on this issue. Because we only allow many of these organizations to have the power over us. We can deny them that power.
Yeah, I think that we've seen the pushback. Today, this women's sports bill that we had in committee actually received a Democrat vote. That wouldn't have happened
a Democratic vote?
History now, there's only 4 of them, so we got 25% of them on that committee.
Yeah.
2 years ago, that wouldn't have happened, though. And so they are starting to understand that this is not, somebody referenced it, this is not the party of John F. Kennedy anymore. It is unrecognizable. The Democrat Party.
This isn't even the party of Jesse Jackson anymore.
Correct. Or Jimmy Carter, or any of the people that we would kind of say are icons of the Democrat Party. So I think that we do have the wind at our back of a population that recognizes this has gone too far. Latino voters don't want to be referred to as Latinx. They certainly don't call their moms birthing persons. Right. And they don't want their bus drivers saying, well, hello, everyone, and heaven forbid I say boy or girl.
I have to tell you, I was in a situation in a state just north of Texas. I won't name it. Just immediately north of Texas. And I was there, and a public school teacher had been told you cannot refer to your students as boys and girls. Now, I will tell you also that the state of Oklahoma has fixed this issue, I believe. But nonetheless, she responded by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen." She was assuming a lot there, but nonetheless, she made her point. Let's talk about the bill concerning girls' sports. Your predecessors in office couldn't have imagined such a thing would be necessary. Let me ask you, what's it like when you articulate this issue before the citizens of your district? My guess is they immediately now understand the need for what you are providing in this bill.
Absolutely. You know, the Leah Thomas Riley Gaines incident, if you will, happened at Georgia Tech University. So we are acutely aware of that having happened. But it is something that's just, you are made to care about it because it is in your face, even if you don't want to recognize or if you don't pursue that reality. I think that when you talk about how you make these arguments, today the way that we presented the bill in committee was not to name call, was not to be aggressive, but was to say, look, there are three values here that we're weighing. We're weighing safety, fairness, and inclusion. And there are some people in the room that would say inclusion is the dominant value that we need to have, and I'm not that person. I am choosing safety first, fairness second, and inclusion third. And in order to fit through that rubric, we have to exclude males from participating in female sport because male advantage is a real thing. We went through a number of examples as to why that reality is something that cannot be objected to. And so we really didn't even get much pushback from the panel on that fact pattern and the way that we laid it out.
So where does the bill go now?
Bill will be on the Senate floor at some point in the near future. And then the bill goes to the House. One of, I think, the differences the Senate has so far with what I've seen discusses the House position is our bill covers K through 12 and collegiate sports, whereas the House bills that have been introduced and even some of the commentary that's come out of the House has kind of had questions around what should happen for colleges. My perspective is that women should not lose the protections that they have around safety and fairness when they graduate high school and go to college.
To use the categories we've been speaking, yes, amen to that. But to use the categories we've been speaking of, ontology does not change between high school and college.
Indeed, correct.
All right. Hopefully they graduate from college having a clue what we're talking about. So what do you see as the greatest challenges facing the people of, let's just put it this way, the people of Georgia, let's say in the next few legislative sessions? What are the big challenges coming?
You're going to hear from Blake Tillery, my good friend, who's the appropriations chairman, and you talked about taxes and the things that your colleagues, your people had to work. They still matter. Well, we're seeing revenues begin to level off, and so we are long in tooth in this economic bull run. And so at some point in time, we're going to have to tighten our belts again. When I first came to the General Assembly 6 years ago, our budget was $26 billion. We're going to be at $38 billion this year. So we have had significant growth in this state. I think the identity of the state is shifting, very similar to many of the southern red states. We have a lot of refugees who are moving here. I'm from Illinois. I mentioned that earlier. We have a lot of Illinois, California, New York, northern states. So how do we and they're moving here, by the way, because they like the environment, but a lot of them move here, 2/3 of them by our data, move here and still vote the same way that they did back home. So I think the biggest challenge that we have in the state is the election in 26, because it will determine, we have, by any measure, the 4th or 5th or 6th most powerful governor in America based on the power that we give that governor through the Constitution and through state law. So who the next governor is in the state of Georgia will determine, in my opinion, the future of the state. We don't know what the next challenge will be, whether it's a COVID-type situation or it's an economic downturn. But what we do know is that the worldview and the principles of that person will be very important in how they navigate through that. So I think that is probably the biggest challenge that we have is Governor Kemp won by 45,000 votes in 2018. He won by 300,000 votes in 2022. So it really moved the needle. It was because people identify with him as a brand. Now the question becomes, how do we transfer that brand and get people to recognize that what they love is not only Governor Kemp, but conservatism as a whole?
What difference does it make that you are a Christian believer?
It defines my worldview, defines how I approach my job and how I approach people, defines, hopefully, the issues that I choose to take up, but more importantly, how I choose to take them up. You know, Colossians 3:17, and whatever you do in word or in deed, do it all in the name of the Lord. And I think that your answer could be for any, your question is not specific to my politics. Your question hopefully is specific to whatever else I'm doing, whether it's in business or somewhere else, and how you approach that as if you are doing it to a higher power, because ultimately that is who we're serving.
You're committed to eternal truths. That makes a huge difference.
It does. First of all, the fact that you recognize that there is truth, because that is a question that's on the table for a lot of people today. Is truth relative? Is morality relative? What are the ways in which we see the world? If you're not anchored in the reality, at least of the idea of an absolute truth, an absolute reality, then anything is on the table, and that's where we see a lot of culture going today. And politics is downstream of culture. And so that is part of the challenge that we face today, is that we are downstream of a culture that is very, very quickly moving away from the very foundation that this nation was founded upon.
I'm not going to contradict you. I do want to offer an alternative understanding.
Let's do it.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, very influential Democratic senator, is the one who at least classically said that politics is downstream from culture. I think there's a biblical understanding of the fact that it also works the other way around. The law teaches. The law says this is what marriage is. I know you affirm that, but I just want to say I think politics is downstream from culture in the short term, but the culture is downstream from the politics long term.
Yeah, that's a good word.
I'm encouraged to have this conversation with you.
Same. I was nervous, I'll be honest with you. I'm the first guy on stage with the great Dr. Al Mohler, who's got, and it's just not the theology background that you have and the fact that you there's just this deep well of wisdom, but your voice is unbelievable.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're very kind. It's been a great honor to be with you, and I'm thankful for you. God bless you. Let's join in stating appreciation.
God bless you. Thank you.